Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love. The fellowship of kindred minds is like to that above. It was a hymn that was written by this guy named John Fawcett back in 1782. Blessed be the tie that binds. And you're saying, oh, that's just great for 1782. That's not us anymore. We've got conflicts. This is the Church of America now. That's 1782 is so long ago. You know, that it binds our heart in Christian love, and we have fellowship with kindred minds as in we think alike. And just like, no, that's not us. We don't have unity anymore. How many different denominations do we have nowadays? I wasn't waiting for an answer. I just thought you'd think about it a second. How many different types of churches do you have? How many different denominations are fighting right now? Oh, they're too liberal. They don't take the gospel seriously enough. They have problems with sexuality issues. And all of these, they're all a mess. There's no unified church anymore. It's all full of conflict. And I start that way because I'm not going to stay there. Some of those are moral issues. Some of those are good theology issues that there needs to be some conflict that we resolve. We're going to talk today about, it seems so trite, but it's not divisive theological issues. It's just conflict within a church. Just conflict. Interpersonal conflict. Quarrels between people. Fights between people that bring out the worst words that we would use towards people that we care about. Just conflict. You know, that happens in the churches today as it has for years. Even in the early church, they've had conflicts. And we're still trying to figure out a way to deal with it well. In the church I grew up in, I think this was my grandpa who said that, you know, the quickest way to start an argument is to get more than one Dutchman in the room. And then that's how you start an argument. You know, because people have strong, passionate feelings towards things. And that's not bad. We should have some passion. But we need to deal with the conflicts as well in better ways than we do. That's where we have the problems. You know, some people that are not even Christians, so, you know, I have to put up with this type of drama in my workplace. I don't want to go to church and have to deal with it too. We should be able to do this better. And I'm not saying that, oh, Celebration, you're just a wreck. No. We can talk about conflicts here and how we deal with them. And hopefully we deal with them the best that we can. I'm just saying in the church as a whole, we need to deal with conflict well. Better than we have in the past. And that's where we're jumping into. Because the early church, they had problems as well. They didn't know how to deal with this. The story for today, we're continuing our series through Acts. And this is the last one we're going to go towards before we go into another series. But Acts chapter 15, it's the end of the chapter. And we're going to talk about, it's the first missionary journey is just done. They came back and said, oh, this is great. Excellent things have happened. And then we get into this. Let me read this to you. It's in your program. It's also going to be on the screen. Acts chapter 15. We're going to start at verse 36. Let me read this to you. After some time, Paul said to Barnabas, let's go back and visit each city where we previously preached the word of the Lord and see how the new believers are doing. Oh, that'd be great. Let's go back. Let's find out how they're growing. Barnabas agreed and wanted to take along John Mark. But Paul disagreed strongly. I just wanted to pause there a second. He didn't disagree slightly. He disagreed strongly. And that's where we start. Paul disagreed strongly since John Mark had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in their work. Their disagreement was so sharp that they separated. Barnabas took John Mark with him and sailed for Cyprus. Paul chose Silas, and as he left, the believers entrusted him to the Lord's gracious care. Then he traveled throughout Syria and Cilicia and strengthened the churches there. You get the autopsy of a fight here, don't you? Like how it started. This is how it happened. They come back and said, it was a huge success. We had this great missionary journey. We started in Cyprus and we went into modern-day Turkey. We talked with all these churches. People were coming to know Jesus. And then we found our way back to our church, and we told people about this. Wonderful things happened. And then we said, let's do this again. Let's go talk with these churches, and let's see if we can do another journey, another missionary journey. And you got Paul, who's like a brilliant mind and a great speaker. So, let's go again. And you have Barnabas, who's the son of encouragement. He's an encourager and he's an administrator in the church. He says, let's be partners and let's do this again. And then there's this guy named John Mark. Well, John Mark's a younger guy. He's the cousin of Barnabas. You know, some people think he's 18 years old, and he's tied together with these two racehorse guys. These studs, these like giants in the faith. You know, they go all these places, and there's things called food that you need. Sometimes you have food because people invite you into the house. And sometimes you're out in the middle of the town square because nobody invited you in, so you're hungry. A young guy saying, well, this isn't very fun. And sometimes you have a place to stay. Someone invites you into their house, and sometimes you don't. You get kicked out of town. Sometimes you even spend time in jail. Oh, Paul and Barnabas, they're not too concerned about this. Oh, we get to be in jail. Yeah, we get to preach to the jailers and these guys around us. We get to do that. And John Mark, this young guy, is like, I don't like this. This is kind of out of my comfort zone. And pretty soon this guy named John Mark says, this isn't for me. I'm going back home. I'm going to desert these two thoroughbreds. I'm racing my way back home. And what happens is, Paul and Barnabas, they come back and they say, this was great. These are the things that happened. And then when they start to go, let's do this again, Barnabas says, hey, let's take my cousin along again. Whoa, wait a minute. You know this guy, he deserted us. No, he's fired. Even before he starts again, he's fired. We're not taking him. The words are, Paul disagreed strongly. Their disagreement was so sharp, a sharp disagreement. You've had sharp disagreements, right? No way are we going to do this. Sharp disagreements. And you can hear what's going to happen. Paul saying the gospel is so important. We can't have loose cannons here that we can't depend on. The gospel, we need people to know about Jesus. We can't depend on this guy. He might leave us in the lurch. Can't do it. We got to be about the mission. And you have Barnabas saying, wait a minute. What about grace? He's the guy who's an encourager. He's the guy that brought Paul, who is persecuting Christians. And he said, hey, we could use him for what God wants to do. And he brought him to the other disciples, and he said, hey, guys, this is Paul. And so Barnabas says, all right, this is my cousin John Mark. Can you forgive him for running away? We understand he ran away. We know this. What about a little grace? God has given us grace. God has forgiven us through Jesus. Can we not forgive John Mark and give him a second chance? Can we do that? Now you see, you see the two sides, don't you? And how this might be a sharp disagreement. It's difficult to not have people you can count on because the gospel is important. And we need to give people second chances sometimes. Well, sometimes you go, wait a minute, I got to put a boundary here. But for most people, you know you need to give them a second chance. You need to forgive. You need to say, you know what, I got to have a little grace here. You know, how about us here? I mean, I only need to go back 2-3 years and just say the word COVID. And that brings us back into the sharp disagreements. Or I could have said Biden-Trump 2020 election, that would have done the same. Where, no, we can't even talk about this to other people, and we're so separate. But we get in those situations where there are sharp disagreements too, don't we? This one just, when you talk COVID, we've had people leave here even. They said, no, I don't want to deal with this. You guys aren't saying, you're not in my camp. You're not thinking and talking the way I would want to talk. The gospel is so important, we need to get together. Now, how about we talk as people and forgive one another who might not agree with us? And there's two different camps, and you understand that. That even brings it into the church. And if we dealt like that, do we deal with problems like that? And can we be unified still as we deal with conflict? I want to pause there a second because there's reasons, good reasons maybe that you say, all right, I'm out of this church. I'm just having troubles. I can't do it. There's good reasons to leave a church over some conflicts. One is a good one is if they're not biblically sound. If they say, well, I feel that this is the theology we should have, but it's not grounded in the Bible, that's a good reason not to stay there. If celebration ever goes off the rails and says, well, this Bible, it's a nice book, but we don't really follow it, you should run towards the doors. You should go. That's a good reason for not staying. Another reason would be if politics is more important than Jesus. That's a good reason. If you can't trust the leaders here, you're thinking, they're so sketchy and I don't trust them. Go to church that you can trust the leaders. Those are good reasons. But for most times, we need to be about unity. We need to resolve conflict well. We need to say, I know that there's sharp disagreements, but we need to come together because the gospel is important. We need to give people second chances and forgive, and we need to take the gospel seriously because people need to hear about Jesus. And that's why we need to resolve this well. So for the rest of my time here, I want to do two things. One, I want to say, all right, this is how, these are great ways to deal with conflict, even here. And I also want to get to the end of the story because there's great things that even came out of conflict that went awry. The sharp disagreements that caused the separation, there's good things that came from that. And we want to get to that. But I think that we need to talk about how are we going to go forward and be the body of Christ even though there might be disagreements? How are we going to do that? Because whether they're today or they're in the future, we want to have a good foundation how to deal with those. How would our Jesus want us to deal with conflict? So for me this week, I said, wow, I want to give some great ideas. And I couldn't find any better way to go through this than what I read from Rick Warren. So I said, I can't improve on that. So I'm going to say, let me give you, there's 7 great things that we are going to do to deal with conflict. And Rick is going to help us with that. So thank you, Pastor Rick. So here we go. And just 7 of them, and they're in your program. I encourage you to write them down. I put some. This is where I get this out of the Bible. This is where it's founded. But I encourage you to write them down so that this is something that is natural for us. So here we go. First one in resolving conflict well is you make the first move. You make the first move. Jesus was talking with people in the Sermon on the Mount, and he said, all right, if you're going to worship God, and you remember that that person has something against me, stop what you're doing. Go figure. It's like if somebody's going to come in here, and then all of a sudden they remember someone has a problem, and they run towards the door to go make peace with them. That's awesome. If you have problems with somebody in here, in the middle of the service even, go make peace with them. But you make that first move. Just go. It's hard to worship God and have a clear heart with Him when you know somebody has something against you. You say, hey, let's make peace. Let's figure this out. But make that move. Most of the time it becomes the role of the person who is most spiritually mature. That they say, you know what, I see that this is what needs to happen. They're probably not going to do it. And the more mature person comes out and says, all right, how can we make peace? But we need to take that first step. Our God took the first step with us and said, I brought Jesus so that we could have peace. We need to make that step with other people. So make that first move, but also ask for God's wisdom. Because some of us are saying, I don't know what that first move is. How do I go forward? Well, did you know that the Bible is full of wisdom? Do we read the Bible and say, man, my God speaks to me through this, and He gives me wisdom that I think like He does? You know, the whole, you can go through Proverbs and go, oh my goodness, that's a great way to deal with some things. You can read through the New Testament and say, that was awesome, and my God is saying, go make some peace here with that person. There is wisdom there. We see people differently when we ask for God's wisdom. We see that person and say, you know, they're not the enemy. I have problems with them, but they're not the enemy. They're a victim of the enemy, and I need to treat them that way. You know, we ask for God's wisdom. How do we see people? And every time we ask for God's wisdom, He says, I got it for you. Let me go on another one. You make the first move. Ask for God's wisdom, but here's your bit of wisdom. Begin with what is your fault. Now, I'll just tell you from my story. It took me years to really identify my mistake at the church I grew up in. They said, no, you don't fire volunteers very often, but they fired me as a volunteer. And nobody has that, right? They said, no, you cannot work with our students anymore. Yeah, you've screwed up here. You took them away to some other place, didn't bring them back on Sunday. There's no communication here. No. And it took me years to understand that so much of it was, I was so immature. I was just so immature. And I thought my pride and ego is like, I didn't think that I needed to communicate with the elders of the church and the leaders, because I knew what I was doing. I wanted them to know Jesus. And it's like, that was on me. And I needed to own my fault. It took me years to get there, but that's mine. You know, we have parts that we need to own. It takes two to tango in every situation. And then when we're in a conflict, you know, what's our part? What did we do? How did we react to what they did? What words did we say? How did we talk with our neighbor about this situation? We should have just talked with them. And we need to own what we did. And the next part is we need to listen to them. You start off this way, I'm so sorry that it came to this point. Help me understand what you're thinking or as you're feeling. That's our part. We just want to listen. I know that that's a foreign word for a lot of us. Like, just to listen to people. It takes a lot of patience to listen. It takes discipline to not have them speak a word and then want to jump in. Just to listen. Just to listen to them. Celebration. If you're new here, you know that Celebration is the church of misfit toys. And we are all broken. And we all have some kind of flaw. And we all have some way that we are dysfunctional. And we need to just own that. And say, you know what, I know that they're broken as well. And sometimes they say things that, out of their brokenness, that I say things out of my brokenness. I need to listen what they're actually saying. I need to listen to them. God, help me to listen. I got a couple more here. We need to speak the truth tactfully. Tact is not attack. You guys got that, right? We speak the truth tactfully. Tactfully is to be able to have skill and sensitivity in dealing relationally. That's a long way of saying it. We have tact with people. And the Bible says, speak the truth, you know this one, with love. If you're around people that say, I was just telling them the truth, well, chances are you weren't saying it very lovingly. And if that's you, there's not a spot for that here. We speak the truth in love. We try to do it tactfully and lovingly. That needs to come forward. I heard a great phrase this week. You're not very persuasive when you're abrasive. You can all write it down. It's good. Keep that in there. If you're being abrasive without love, how is that helping? It's causing more disunity. And that something that God says, wait a minute, I want you to be one as I am one. These are my people. Speak the truth tactfully. I got two more here. You want to fix the problem, not the blame. Guys got that one right? It's so American to say, all right, who's at fault here? We go into politics and we all, no, they're at fault on this one. No, they're on fault on this one. And we don't fix the problem. We just assign blame. Hopefully we can get reelected on this one. It's about fixing what's going on. And we just want to fix it. Let's get to what's going on here. I even love, we went to the Keys a number of years back and got to it was called the Little White House, where Harry Truman used to stay and do his work there. And Harry Truman was famous for this phrase: it's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit. We want to resolve the conflict, get back to unity here so we can go forward with telling people about Jesus. Who cares who was blamed for the problem? Let's just fix the problem. Let me give you the last one here. You need to focus on reconciliation and not just resolving it. I'll give you a little clue in how the council works sometimes. If there is a split vote, it's going to be kind of even or really close to even on a vote on something, that just means we need more conversation. It's not about just saying, oh, we made a decision. There we go. It's not about that. What about the relationship in the room? What about the relationships here? It's not about just doing things, it's about relationships. Are we all right with just fixing this problem and not fixing the relationships or the hurt feelings or the understanding of another person or seeing how it's going to affect the church? There's been many times that we've just said, all right, we need to table this because it's really emotional right now. Because the people in the room are more important than just fixing this issue. We need to come back to it. We will. But we're important to each other. That each person is important. And we need to hear from them. And we need to resolve this. Yes, we do need to. But not at the expense of the relationships. Not at the expense of having peace between people and resolving it lovingly. And that's the non-negotiable on this one. We need to be about relationships. We need to be speaking the truth in love. That's how we do things. And I'm grateful for Rick for putting this together. But that's what we do here. That's how we are church, community. So, and hopefully that will be helpful for you here, also in your families, maybe in your workplace. But I need to get one other thing here, because I wanted to spend time at the end. The end of the story. The end of the story, the end of what we read was Paul and Barnabas split. They had such a sharp disagreement that they split. But that's not the end of the story. Let me tell you this. The end of it was Paul and this guy named John Mark, they eventually reconciled. I don't know how it happened. Whether one of them said, hey, I was being stupid, and okay, let's do this forgiveness thing. Or maybe it was John Mark, he grew up a little bit and got more mature. It doesn't say in the Bible because that's not the important part, but they reconciled. The writer of the Gospel of Mark was John Mark. He spent so much time with Paul and Peter, he wrote the first Gospel. God did great things by bringing them together at the end. He does the same with us. There's lots of conflicts that it took years to bring people together again. And God does those things. He builds bridges where people have just wiped them out. He transforms hearts and does great things through them. Maybe we have some people that we need to build some bridges with again. And say, you know what, I need to reconcile just like Paul and John Mark did. But let me give you one more thing on this story. The end of the story was people reconciled, which is awesome. But the other part of it was God still did His plan. God still was working in His plan. So you had one missionary journey. You had Paul and you had Barnabas. All of a sudden they have fight. You have two missionary journeys now. God still said, my gospel's going forward. I'm changing lives. And now I'm going to have two missionary journeys here. Barnabas said, I'm going back to my hometown. I'm going to take my friend John, my cousin John Mark. We're going back to Cyprus. And we're going to do ministry in Cyprus. People are going to come to know Jesus there. And Paul says, you know what, I'm going to take this guy named Silas because I love working with him. And we're going to go throughout Turkey and into Greece. And we're going to talk to people about Jesus there. And it was not just one missionary journey, it was two, because God said, I am going to do some great things here still. I don't give up on anybody. And I want people to know about Jesus, that He is the one who makes people right with Almighty God. Our God is always working to bring His people home. Our Jesus brings all of His sheep. Not one of them gets lost. He brings them all home. That's the good news as well. And it's important to see how our God works.